Just give me a thumbs up when it's good.
Are you ready?
I'm waiting for Ryan, but if he could just give me a thumbs up when I'm good to go.
Hey, Ryan, give her a thumbs up when you're done.
Okay, perfect. Then we're good.
No, I'm going to use paper.
That's fine.
Old school.
Okay. You're good?
Yep, set.
You're good?
Everybody else can't get
There's
in?
two that are featured.
Yeah.
Obviously, picture right
The
there.
ones for tonight?
You got it.
Sounds like a plan.
Ready?
Join the meeting.
That's what you do right there.
All right. Good evening. It is Tuesday, not Thursday, Tuesday. Are we on? We're good? All right. Good evening. It's Tuesday, April 25th. It is roughly 6:32 p.m. This is a regular meeting of the Olentangy Schools Board of Education. I will call the meeting to order. Mr. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Lester?
Here.
Dr. Dabrico?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Dr. Wise?
Here.
Dr. Wallach?
Here.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. All right, I will now entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written with no adjustments or
Correct.
amendments. Motion, please. So moved. Can I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Jenkins? Any discussion on the agenda? All right, seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Dr. Wise?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
All right, so the agenda is approved as written. So tonight, we've got, so we'll go right to the president's report. So setting up the meeting, we've got 1, 2, 3 presentation items before we get to the superintendent's report. And then, so for me, relative to the superintendent search, which I think is top of mind for most folks. So we've got 13 candidates that kind of in the pool. So, and we had an application process that was open for about 30 days. We will meet tomorrow night in executive session to review the candidates and to kind of for lack of a better word, cut down to the folks that we want to interview. Coming out of tomorrow night, we will then come with a list, what the number is, 3, 4, 5, we'll figure out based upon the quality and the desire of the board on how we want to move forward. We will then have initial interviews. I believe we set May 1st, 2nd?
I think that's right.
Right?
Second and third.
Second and third, I'm sorry, for the initial set of interviews, and we'll continue that process. I know Krista in the communications group has put the timeline out a couple of times, but we want to continue to reinforce the timeline, how we're getting through the process. Based upon my initial discussions with Dr. Lucas, we have a really good pool of candidates that we'll have to choose from. Look forward to the interviews and that process, and I think we're in good shape. So we will continue to update the community as that evolves. So, anyone else?
Last week, we had the Student Mental Health and Wellbeing Committee. We're rounding it, as we had talked last summer when we formed this committee. We're really looking at, a one-year report out to what we've done, and then, what we see as future action items and where we go from there. So we're rounding up on that one-year period here and looking forward to having that report. In the meantime, just collecting, sort of final thoughts to get ready. So we're in
Great.
good shape there.
Good. Kevin?
I don't want to steal Mr. Jenkins' thunder. Finance and Audit met last week, and we are so blessed to have great folks that come and spend a long time going through the details to make sure they understand the direction of the district financially. But I won't steal any more of your thunder. That's it.
Going this way?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, we'll wrap that up. We'll jump right into the presentation items. The first presentation item is the Seeds of Change. Please come up, and it is Joseph, I'm gonna Cherubino and Teresa Knapp.
Welcome.
Yes,
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Seeds of Change is, can I click?
You got it.
Oh, there we go. Seeds of Change was created by the curriculum department last year, was the first year, as a way to expand the professional development that they offer us as teachers in the district. And it allows teachers to come up with their own professional learning projects that they want to research and explore and create on their own. It's like whatever our own personal little interests are that we want to look at topics for our classrooms and our students and our own professional learning. It's hard with a district our size for them to offer PD that is very specific to everyone's needs and interests through our professional development days that are already in there. So this gives us a way to explore our own interests and our own professional learning.
So just like we encourage students to have an authentic learning experience, a project-based experience, that's what Seeds of Change gives to us. It's something authentic to our professional development. It's a project that we get to choose and follow through with, which really helps us to stay excited about teaching, to stay motivated with teaching. And then it gives us the opportunity to network, not only through the project itself, getting feedback from colleagues about our work, but also just meeting other people that might be interested in like topics through that Seeds of Change experience.
So I participated last year with the first year's group, and my topic was on playful learning in the secondary classroom. And I've continued to look at this year, just not formally with Seeds of Change. And it builds, that topic is the research is coming out of Harvard's Project Zero, and the Lego Foundation is funding it, and it has pilot schools all over the world. There's the one in the United States is in Boston, but there's one in Europe and one in South Africa as well, and they're looking at the characteristics of playful learning, specifically in upper elementary, middle, and high school learners. It's very different than the learning that happens in primary grades. So there's the characteristics on the slide there. I could talk forever on this topic because I've learned a lot and I use it a lot and I think it's great for kids, but I know these presentations are brief. So, but you can see there the characteristics of what that looks like in the classroom, and here's sort of the general umbrella of what playful learning encompasses, where you have free play, which is just the kids playing. If you think about your own children just playing and doing things, that's what that would be. Really in the classroom, it's guided play or even something that's a structured game that we would use in playful learning, and allows the kids to engage in the learning in a different way. And I also use it to assess what they've learned. They can create products through this process, a lot of inquiry and those things. I think I've become the Johnny Appleseed of this, and like pointed out to colleagues all the time, hey, you're using this in your classroom. It's just another pedagogy. It's another strategy to use. I'll let you click.
Sounds good. And then I participated in Seeds of Change both last year and this year. I'm an intervention specialist at Heritage Elementary currently, and have been in the district for the past 20 years. And so last year, I focused more on students having a better understanding of what their IEP is. Why do they have one? What does it mean to be a different type of learner? How do we celebrate that? We went ahead and we rewrote IEP goals so that the kids understood them. We talked about how to track our progress so that they were really an active participant in that IEP process. I've continued that project this year, but I've also added another piece to it. This year, I've had the opportunity to teach Orton Gillingham Phonics at Heritage, which is a valuable instructional tool for us. But the students are hearing a lot of the same concepts year after year. We do want to keep them engaged, and we do want to make things a little bit more authentic. And so what I did this year is I wove in some authentic learning through phonics instruction. And not everybody knows this, but I dress most weekends as a Ghostbuster. I do have the Ecto outside if anyone is interested. And so, of course, one of our lessons was Ghostbuster themed.
You're the one. I see that on your, I had no idea whose car that was.
Yeah, that's mine. Yep, so now you know.
I saw it in
If you would ever like me to do a visit to central office, I could do that in costume for you. So my third and fourth graders went down into kindergarten and first grade, and we talked about how ER says like in Ghostbuster. And then a couple weeks later, we came down and we dressed like pirates, and we learned that AR says R like a pirate, because we have to make learning fun, not only for my students, but for the students we're teaching as well. And so this is what we did. We had a wonderful time with it. Now my students are working on literacy centers in the kindergarten classroom, and this is just a little snippet from Seeds of Change this year. I've been trying to make OG just a little bit more engaging and fun and authentic. So like once a month we go down, Lisa Ham and I do literacy centers together.
Oh, wow.
So my OG students are coming down and teaching the kindergartners phonemic awareness activities. And then my students are also creating mini lessons on different phonics concepts they feel comfortable with. And that is it. Any questions?
Any questions for comments?
Well, thank you so much for this. And, you know, our teachers are one of the best resources we have in the district, right? And so leveraging your thoughtfulness and your creativity to help engage the students, it's transformative. I know my kids, just all the different exciting different projects they get to do, and, you know, that really engages them. And so I'm glad that we're able to do it, you know, both for them, but for you all, right? I mean, it's essential that we're building an environment where you all feel that you have the ability to grow and to adapt to ways, to different methods, and then share with your colleagues. So I think this is wonderful. And thank you so much for all the work that you're doing here.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you.
So very impressed in the two professional learning tracks that you each chose, that it's so student-centered, it's so student-focused. I had, my daughters are quite young, and in their earliest learning experiences, they were in Montessori learning environments. So that playful, inquiry-based learning is so important, but so often we do see it sort of fizzle or fade after elementary. So the fact that you're taking that on in the upper grades, I think, is phenomenal. And Teresa, I'm also confident with this newfound knowledge of you that you make everything fun outside of not just learning. And you really did, you solved a mystery for me this evening. So I'm very excited.
Saw it out there, huh?
Yeah. I was like, okay. So very excited to know all of these things. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
I actually had an opportunity to attend the Seeds of Change. So it was awesome to see the different projects that the teachers were working on. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Who are you connecting with talking about this? You said Boston's the only place in the United States. Are you talking to folks all over the world? What does that look like?
They have the pilot school. So the research set up 3 pilot schools, one in Boston, one in Denmark, and one in South Africa. All of that stuff is online. So I took the Project Zero's online course, which we had a cohort from the district. It was me and some elementary folks that were in there, but they also then connect you with whoever else around the country or the world is interested in this. And they run a brilliant website that has all of their research and all of their literature and all of these videos and like anything you ever wanted to know on this topic, you can access pretty easily. So that's really like my connection to the research and the people who are working on it right now. They're supposed to wrap up the research this year and publish. They started back in 2015. So we'll see what comes out of, like, once they, publish the final results, what that looks like. I'm hoping for a book. I really am.
Yeah, please keep me posted. I'd love to see what they come up with. So just so I'm clear, so this inquiry-based learning, it could look different in every classroom or across the district. So that allows kids, correct me if I'm wrong, but it allows kids to kind of meld this with their own interests, which is what drives learning. It defeats this, I'm not motivated, or I'm getting something hand-delivered. So it'll look different in every classroom, wherever it's, but it's still wrapped around a learning standard or whatever you have for there. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you for choosing to teach here. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Very good. No, we always give compliments to the curriculum team for coming up with new ideas to keep our teachers engaged. I think leveraging our teachers as a major focus of our professional development. Vince, I don't know, how many OPDA courses do we offer that our teachers teach?
Typically throughout the year, it's like upwards of 40 to 50. Some of them are building-based, but some of them are district-wide also.
Yeah, and continuing to leverage our experts is a way it's very cost-effective to do that, but also very powerful and impactful when, they see them impacting their colleagues. So it's really one of the things we do, I think, that's very special.
All right, very good. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great job.
Yeah, just clap it out for them. There we go.
Okay, the next presentation item is the resource adoptions and renewals. Monica Brown and Vince Titilio.
Vince is, what's the word, giving away your time?
I'm here to support.
Yes.
And great support he is. Good evening, everyone. Formal introduction. My name is Monica Brown, and it is my absolute honor and pleasure to serve in the role of Assistant Director of Elementary Curriculum underneath the great leadership of Vince Titilio. I'm here tonight to share with you some highlights from the K-5 math adoption resource process. And I want to recommend to you that following my presentation, that you approve the purchase of Bridges in Mathematics as the next K-5 OLSD math resource. So arriving at this recommendation was not by happenstance. It has been a very detailed and focused process, and it was rooted in Board Policy 2510. And as you know, the policy speaks to curricular resource decisions. One of the tenets of that board policy is revolving around making sure that the materials lack any bias. You can tell from this list, we have a very robust list of participants that were part of the review team in the effort to ensure that the materials did indeed lack bias and supported all of our OLSD students. You can see from this list that there was representation in every area. And while the beginning of the list, you will notice, are mainly district representatives, the primary review process was done in the buildings by our teachers. There were a total of 48 pilot teachers, 2 teachers across the grade levels, K-5, and a gifted specialist or intervention specialist in each elementary building. They worked alongside our math specialists. Thank you so much for the math specialists, to pilot this in our buildings. Their input was also given from the Continuous Improvement Committee. We received input from them, and that is a group that is made up of parents. So we also wanted to hear from our parents what they wanted to see. As my previous presenter shared, we know this has to be brief, so I will not read the 79 individual names of people who actually participated in this process. In some way, they were part of either the preliminary team, a primary review team, an observation team, or the pilot team. I want to just say thank you to each of them for sharing their knowledge, their gift, and their time with all of us for this process. It would not have been as thorough without them. So let's dive in, shall we? Let's start with the overview of the review criteria. These are just a few points. We had a long list, right? Our OSD deserves the best. We had a long list of things we were looking for, but these are just 4 main points. First and foremost, we conducted an inventory of what's currently being used in our district. We realized that we wanted to streamline that and make sure we had a primary resource that would implement and make sure we had a coherent and consistent math curriculum. So we started the preliminary review process with an analysis of Ed Reports. And if you're not familiar with Ed Reports, it is the go-to publication and organization regarding giving K-12 instructional materials ratings. And we wanted to make sure that whatever we put in front of our teachers as an option had the highest rating. We also looked at recommendations from ODE. They put out a curriculum resource selection workbook that helps you work through different processes so that you make sure you select the one that is best for your community. And last but certainly not least, we looked at alignment with the state standards and the OSD math model. What is the OSD math model? I'm glad that you asked. It's right up there for you.
I'm glad that you asked.
Glad you asked. The OSD math model, this is literally just a sound bite from it. It was developed back in 2019 by district representatives and teachers. It was created in an effort to ground ourselves in what we felt we wanted to see in mathematics instruction for our students. It helped develop a common understanding and a vision regarding effective mathematical practices. The math model outlines the 4 components you see before you. And don't worry, I'm going to tell you what they are. We're going to start with discourse, which is the verbal or written exchange of ideas. It's that conversation and accountable talk that you hear or see written when you're performing a mathematical task. Then there's number sense, which is basically the relationship between numbers and looking at your intuition regarding that. There's guided math, which is a structure for providing data-driven instruction in small, flexible groups. And then we have problem solving, which is just what it says, solving problems and finding solutions to issues. So from the start of the process, I would say this was the heart of each team's focus to make sure that anything that was selected aligned closely with these components. So if you look in the lower right, there's a little link in your free time. You can take a click and examine it a little closer. All right, now we're going to dive into the timeline. So in the months of November through January, there was a lot of time spent with the review team analyzing all of the possibilities that were out there, and there are a lot. Again, we used that criteria that I shared with you later, and then kind of whittled the list down to 4. From that list of 4, we had the vendors come in and present and share with us why their material. We also examined where were other like districts using around us. So from that list of 4, the preliminary team decided, okay, here are the top 3 that we're going to bring to the front of the review team. And I want to note that the review team consisted of math specialists, EL, gifted, intervention. Again, you see where I'm going. We had a wide verse of people who looked at it. They listened to the vendor presentations and they reviewed materials using a rubric with the criteria that I shared earlier. So based on their analysis, 2 rose to the top, and they were illustrative math and bridges in mathematics. So then the pilots begin in each building. But don't worry, we wanted to make sure the entire community had a chance to share input. So there was a digital resource guide that was provided where teachers could take home at their leisure, click, look around, see what they thought, give feedback via survey. There was a curriculum adoption display. You may have seen it during a board meeting one day. That was over in Genoa Cafe. We also collected feedback from principals, the committee, anyone who wanted to tell us what they thought. So guess what April was doing? Reviewing 276 surveys to make sure, yes.
In our experiences, people are not shy about giving feedback.
Well, we read every bit of it. It provided both anecdotal feedback and numerical feedback, which I'm going to share with you right now, or as I like to call this portion, and the survey says. So here we go with the survey. In this first slide, again, we're starting with the heart of it, the alignment with the OSD math model. So the respondents were asked, what you see in front of you is them responding to using a scale of strongly aligned, aligned, somewhat aligned, or not aligned at all. How do you see this component aligning with our OSD math model? So you can see when you look at discourse, you see that it was pretty comparable. That is on purpose. We wanted, again, to bring in front of our teachers, hey, if it's 1, that's fine too. Both of these are viable options. But you can also look at the other 3 categories, and you can see clearly that bridges rose to the top regarding alignment. Some other areas that I just want to share with you have to do with differentiation. So again, using that same scale, bridges in mathematics, 78%, whereas illustrative had a 10% response rate of strongly agree. So now I want to share with you, oh, sorry, missed slide. I want to also share with you, each respondent was asked, okay, after they answered many questions, how likely would you be to recommend this resource to us? So this scale was 1, not likely at all, or 5, extremely likely. Would you see this for our math resource? And you can see once again, Bridges with a 4.3 and Illustrative with 2.5. So we also collected qualitative data. So you can see on your screen just a couple of quick clips from a first grade teacher where she is recommending Bridges, expresses that it's detailed, it's user-friendly, she likes that the learning objectives are clear, it's engaging, it's hands-on, and it gives all of our learners opportunity to they can have rich discussions. Then the next teacher talks about how she did not want the program to end. So this is one of the pilot teachers. We had to pry the materials out of her hands. She was excited for math. Her students were engaged, and I love that she has coined a new word. She said they are actively mathing as they transform the math block. So how can you resist that? And of course, going back to the Continuous Improvement Committee, which you may recall consists of parents, they gave us a list as well, but I wanted to just pull out 3 things that they really wanted to see. And I hope you agree that it connects with what the teachers also expressed. Meeting the needs of the students, providing support for that differentiation, and having a focus on hands-on manipulatives. So, keeping in mind with Bridges, just a brief kind of overview for the structure and components in Bridges. There's an 80-minute block during math instruction. It starts with problems and investigations. And during problems and investigations, the teacher poses a problem, and the students engage either independently in groups or in pairs with solving the problem. They have some independent work time, and then they all come back together to discuss it. So that's that kind of discourse you heard about earlier. Then we also have workplaces. This is a time where different activities are provided to the students, and the teacher has the opportunity to do that data-driven instruction with them. So Bridges provides the workplaces that you can use to connect with the students based on data. And then we have Number Corner. Number Corner is one of the essential parts of Bridges. During Number Corner, teachers and students work on different contexts and different standards that they're practicing, that they're learning throughout the year. And I have to mention that it's a very strong home connection component. So as you can see, each teacher receives home connection books that gives activities and games and things you can send home with the students that they can work on with their families. A little more teacher feedback. This is like my favorite part. So from an intervention specialist, she shared that she saw a lot of growth in the math skills for her students when she was piloting. She felt they had a deeper understanding, and she really appreciated the manipulatives. You'll also see from a 5th grade teacher how much she really enjoyed the process. She talks about how she felt like, hey, it's time. We need some new life in our math instruction. She wanted more consistency. She felt challenged as a teacher, and she is excited for the next step. And she hopes that Bridges is part of it. So, next step. Let's talk about next steps. So, upon your approval, what we will be looking at is offering some ongoing professional development opportunities for our teachers that we would hope to start in this spring and then continue into the summer. The one thing that all the teams talked about was not just having that one time, continuing that professional learning. And Bridges does offer a very robust program where we're able to pull in the experts to help us here as well, along with our math specialists. It gives coaching materials so that they're working alongside the teachers, and even administrators have an opportunity to go to a Getting Ready to Lead Bridges workshop. All of these things do make Bridges rise to the top. So here's our rollout. We would have 2 phases to the rollout. In 23-24, we would do Bridges Number Corner and Intervention Kits, and then in 24-25, Bridges 3rd Edition and Concept Quest. Here's what that does. It gives an opportunity for a laser focus on each component. That's another thing that we often hear. We start new things. There's so much to do. You can't focus on one. So we thought we could do this gradual rollout, and that will allow the teachers more time to really master that particular component. So, that is my Bridges presentation, but I have a spoiler alert for you. I will be back on May the 9th. And on May the 9th, we are going to make a request for this approval for the Bridges Number Corner materials, along with a few other resources from K-12. You notice on there geodes. I appreciate the earlier approval. We'll be asking for a couple more of those. There's some things from my colleague on there as well. And then you'll notice, remember, the rollout is in 2 parts. So we'll also be requesting spring 2024, the purchase of the Bridges 3rd Edition materials. That's for the other components. So that is all I have. I thank you for your time, and I'd like to know what questions or comments you have for me. Oh, yeah. Go.
I had the opportunity to see geodes. I think
Oh,
at
okay.
Seeds of Change, I think someone had something.
She did, yes,
Okay,
Lisa
I remember
Ham.
seeing that.
I
Okay,
think it was Lisa
yes,
Ham.
and they were very excited about bridges and the geodes. So I
Okay.
heard some positive from the teachers, a lot of
That is
excitement.
wonderful. Thank you for that, Dr. Wise. That is a wonderful thing.
Let me.
This way, this way.
So, just a question. So,
Sure.
first of all, I appreciate the thoroughness of this, right, and really wanting to engage the community in that. And math is one of those areas that's just difficult for a lot of kids. So, finding ways to engage them effectively is vital. Can you speak a little bit about comparatively? I mean, we saw very different scores, right? A pretty broad separation between those two. You highlighted a couple of features, but what is it that makes Bridges so much more engaging and so much more effective for everyone as compared to the other option? Like, what unique qualities about it just really, highlight that?
Okay, so I think that one quality that we spoke about, and I'm going to give you not just Monica Brown's thoughts, these are thoughts that I've collected from the surveys. One thing that stood out was definitely the number corner component, because it's more than just a calendar. Kids are really digging deep into looking at not just what day of the week is it, but they have certain skills that they're working on based on their grade level. So that's definitely a standout component, to the point that sometimes Bridges even offers that as a standalone, and people add it to their program, which we feel like we want the whole program, right? Our teachers deserve that. So that's a standalone place as well. Workplaces, I had the opportunity to see workplaces. We went to Dublin to observe workplaces in Bridges in implementation. They've been doing it for about 2 or 3 years. So I think that's another thing that stands out. It goes beyond just, you probably heard of like math stations, so you give maybe a child a worksheet. They have a robust program that aligns with each and every standard, and it's very intricately weaved. Like, sometimes you may not understand why you're doing a skill before another, but the way Bridges puts it together is in a way that develops deep conceptual understanding. I recall a survey, and it's from one of our teachers, but she's actually a parent, and her child is in Dublin, and she talked about her child coming home with this deep conceptual understanding that goes just beyond rote facts. So that's another thing that stands out. It's not just rote recall of facts, it's really diving into problem solving. That would be a difference.
Thank you.
Sure.
How do we know this is doing what we want it to do a year or two down the road? How will this be evaluated?
Well, there's many different ways we can evaluate, right? Because, for example, we did ask when we went to visit Dublin, and I forgot to mention that was another part of the process too, is where we went to visit a district implementing illustrative math. We also went to visit a district that was implementing Bridges in Dublin. And one thing they shared was that they saw growth in their student growth measure. So that is something that we would look at here as well, using Ames Web data, seeing what growth that we see. Of course, we have the standard test scores we can look at. I always like to say, though, you can never attribute one thing. It's our teachers who teach the students. That is who is doing the job. But we will definitely look at many various data points to determine, is it doing the job, and reevaluate.
Yeah, I'd also be curious to see what parents think about it after a year or two.
No, that's a good
Because you
point. As
include
a
them on the
student.
front end, I'd be curious to see what they say a year or two in. Yeah, but those are great data points, district stuff and, of course, state stuff, so thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, this is year 20 for me in the district. I want to say this is the third math resource. We had everyday math and math in focus, and now Bridges. That is major adoptions. We're spending big money on this as a resource. And the frustration I've always had is the fact that we don't always implement it with fidelity, and that really hold people accountable to use the resource. And again, we rely on our teachers and their expertise to decide what type of instruction and what type of resources to use, but we're spending big money on a resource. We expect it to be used and not just sitting on a shelf. The difference in this adoption, I think this process has been outstanding, so thank you for leading it, Monica. But the difference is we've made the investment in the math specialist to be present, to ensure that the resources will be used. And our principals will have one point of contact in that. So I have great confidence, even though I won't be here to witness it, that the resource will be used with fidelity.
Well, don't worry, all this technology, we'll make sure you get a little peek.
You let me know?
And we'll let you know. We got you.
Mr. Rafe,
Don't you worry.
Just curious, one of the goals of the math coaches was to make sure that we're catching all the kids as we emerge from COVID, to make sure that
Correct.
every kid, we're not assuming every kid, so, great. I think you're answering my question without me articulating it very well.
But we've also, I mean, we've made that investment in those math coaches, and eighth grade math has been a touchy, a difficult metric for us to hit. And I think this is one of those things, is that the more we do to invest in K through 5 will yield results for that eighth grade indicator, because that's the one glaring one we haven't hit. And that ensuring the consistency of instruction in mathematics K through 5 is very important. And we also did invest at the middle school level on tutors. We hired building subs, additional intervention tutors specifically for math support, to try to get those kids caught up. And when is the eighth grade test? Soon? Just took it.
Yeah, my son just took it.
Okay, all right.
Science was today.
We'll see.
I took it today.
And Mr. Superintendent Rafe, you reminded me of something that I was remiss in not mentioning. Part of that team, in case you don't get a chance to take a look at the list, was a representative from middle school math specialists, so that they were able to give us their lens, right, like beyond K to 5 and thinking forward of the types of things like that his cohort would want to see in our math program. So he did also contribute as well.
So just reinforcing this point, although our district really has no contemporaries with our size and the achievement we have, how many districts had a perfect 25? 12 out of 600. We
9.
still realize that there's kids that need extra
Yes.
supports, and that's what we're talking about.
I can just add one thing really quick. I just want to make sure I say thank you to Monica for all this work. Like, literally, I mean, I have learned so much from how she's approached this, her expertise, her experience, her thoroughness about involving as many voices as she could. And I really believe, and she didn't get bogged down along the way, which is easy to do.
So
You
you should have included the video, so tell them what you did to reveal it.
Okay.
Because it
Well,
wasn't
since
adoption.
you brought it up, thank you, Superintendent Wright. So with the principals and math specialists, I'm all about an analogy. The analogy we use with the math adoption is adopting a child, right? So you adopt a child, you plan for it, you research, you find out about it, and then once you make that decision, it's like a reveal, like a gender reveal. So we treated it like that. We had a big celebration, and we celebrated once we realized exactly what we would be proposing for adoption. And then thinking about that, after you adopt a child, you have a parenting plan. You work to take care of the child. There's going to be some challenges, and part of the survey was looking at strengths and challenges, but you accommodate them, right? And you go with the flow. So
They produced a video, took balloons outside, pink and blue balloons, and then let off these blue cannons. Dr. Fetty wasn't smart enough to stand far enough away from him, got covered in blue.
Oh, my God.
He was our balloon person. Yeah. So we tried to have a little fun with it, but in all seriousness, that is the comparison. This is something that, as Superintendent Rafe said, we want to make sure we see it, and we see it implemented, and we see it being used, because this is the program, not that I selected, not the curriculum selected, we as a collective body selected. And again, I can't even take credit for the process. This has been a labor, for lack of a pun, of love, okay, in terms of bringing it all together. And that absolutely would not have been done without my fabulous team and all of the people on that list, so.
And we are fortunate, because Bridges is releasing 3rd edition, not next year, but the following year. So we're only going to adopt a piece of their program, and then the following year, adopt the full program and kind of spend the money incrementally. And because had we been a year earlier, we probably would have adopted the 2nd edition and then 2 years later changed the whole program. And we're fortunate in the timing of how this all timed up.
Gives us the gift of time. And I also have a Bridges buddy. There's another district that recently, they didn't look at our particular two, but they recently decided to adopt Bridges too, so.
How many full-time people from Bridges do we have working with our district? I mean, I'm assuming
Come
there's
on.
at least
like they
one
connect with
person that's full-time helping us, or no?
So after you approve the recommendation, I will be able to give you a better, right now I'm working with one person, like
Okay.
one-on-one. But there's also, so they have it set up. So we have the one person that kind of works with the materials purchase. Then we have another person that works with, you saw the intervention kit. something we're excited about. We're pairing with an intervention specialist. The math specialist and an intervention specialist will pair up in order to kind of train the trainer and offer that support, so that's exciting. There's a person who oversees that, and they recently released the Concept Quest, which was on one of the slides, which is a layer. It has enrichment things within the program right now, but they've enhanced it with another layer. So there will be someone also that helps support that. You know, we want all the people because we deserve them, and they help take care of the baby, but, you know.
Well, thank you again for sharing. I don't think any of us thought that we just put names of curriculum on the wall and like threw a dart to make a selection, but knowing the real deep vetting that goes into this process, as an ELA certified person, I really like my numbers people who are willing to do the hard work on this stuff. So this is exciting. Thank you very much for sharing with us.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much.
Great job.
Have a good evening.
Okay, our last discussion item, this is a tough act to follow, is modular classrooms. Gordon?
Right.
Like big time. I want to hear about this.
I guess Mr. Fetty's going to start the conversation.
Yeah, I'm going to lead off,
Go ahead.
and then I'll hand it off to Mr. Gordon. Good evening. So I'm here to present on our plan, our proposed plan for enrollment management at Cheshire Elementary. We have some student growth in the Cheshire attendance area. Just frame of reference, Cheshire attendance area is roughly Cheshire Road north, the entire northern half of the district, all the way above to the northeast corner. And what we've seen in this area in the last 24 months or so has been just a tremendous enrollment boom. And really it's been happening for a while, but just in the last, I think I have a number on here that it's been like 400 home sites have been developed adjacent to the Berlin High School, Berlin Middle, Cheshire Elementary property just in the last 2 years. So we know that there's been and will continue to be growth around Cheshire. Back in April of 2020, the school had 677 students. Thereafter, the following year, there was up to 745. We redistricted. When Shell Meadows opened, got it back down to 637, and now it's grown again. It's about 755. And at the start of next year, it's projected to be 817, and then at the start of the following year, it's projected to be 917 students assigned to Cheshire Elementary School. So, as we know, all 100 of those students between the 23-24 and 24-25 school year won't show up at the same time on the first day of 24-25. We have students enrolling every day all year. So we have a problem next year, and we know the growth is going to continue. We also know that Elementary 17 will be able to relieve Cheshire when we redistrict, and that school opens in the 24-25 school year. But it leaves us in a bit of a quandary until that time in terms of how do we want to manage the enrollment. Our typical process for managing enrollment when a school spikes is to overflow students. And we're doing that this year, but with the amount of students that we're seeing, we feel like overflow is not the best option. So as we get into the options that we've considered, this is a map of Cheshire Elementary, but oftentimes on the facilities committee we'll have the conversation about what is the true capacity of an elementary school. We typically say elementary capacity is 650 students. And certainly somebody will say, well, you have 755 at Cheshire right now, isn't that the capacity? Well, we can always be creative and fit students in to a point, but there's an ideal capacity of 650, and we know that 817 and 917 is beyond that stretch capacity that we sometimes have to live within. So roughly 650 students is ideal at an elementary. That allows for 12 K through 2 rooms, 15 3 through 5, and 2 SLCs. Certainly students could show up in different quantities. Maybe you have more K2 students, or we want to have a lower class size, so that presses it. Maybe you need a third SLC classroom. So it's never an exact science in terms of students in the schools, but we look at capacity every way we can to see what can work within the structure of a school. And what we did at Cheshire, looking at the growth, we first identified that we can't hold all of the projected students in the 29 classrooms in the building because the classrooms themselves couldn't hold that many students. So we looked at overflowing students, and because our entire district is a high enrollment district, we can't even overflow the Cheshire students to one school like we've been able to do in other circumstances. So certain grade levels next year hypothetically could be overflowed to Shale Meadows. This year they're all overflowing to Shale Meadows. But next year we couldn't put them all at Shale Meadows. About 50 students would go to Shale Meadows, about 40 would go to Arrowhead. That would be a new scenario for us, a double overflow. And it's not ideal because families could be split across multiple schools. There would be so many additional bus routes. It would still leave Cheshire with about 730 students, which is high. It would also leave Shale Meadows at 730-ish, plus their 4 preschool rooms. Arrowhead would be around 670, plus their 6 preschool classrooms. So we would be taking overcrowding at Cheshire and spreading it to evenly across 3 schools and having 3 overcrowded schools or high enrollment schools. So that's one option that we considered, but again, it's not, we don't feel like it's the best option for students because of the bus routes, and the best option for families because of the splits amongst schools. We also looked at a modification to only overflow to one school, so only overflow to Shale Meadows, and then instead of overflowing to Cheshire, to lease 2 modular classrooms to accommodate the students who would otherwise be going to Arrowhead. It would reduce the strain on families and transportation, and there would still be a cost, but it would still leave the Shale Meadows enrollment around 730, and the Cheshire enrollment would be around 770 at that point, which is still not ideal. Plus 2 modular classrooms, helps to relieve it, but we thought, what would more modular classrooms do? So we'll get to that option. We also looked at Berlin Middle School. The board is familiar with, I forget the year, but the opening of Orange High School. 2009. Orange High School, when Mr. Meyer opened it, had 6th graders from Orange Middle. It was before my time in the district. But so we've sent elementary students, we've sent middle school students to high schools before, and I think all the way back when we opened Olentangy High School, their first year they had kindergarten at Olentangy High School. So not an unprecedented idea. So working with Mr. Elkins, the principal at Cheshire, and Mr. Davis, the principal at Berlin Middle School, they worked and looked at their schedules and their needs and identified that we could move 5th grade to Berlin Middle School and utilize some space in Berlin because, as you know, when we redistricted for Berlin, we allowed room for growth because of the development in the area. It would still require a single modular room at Cheshire because we couldn't get them all into Berlin. There's only going to be, we think, 5 sections of 5th grade. We need 6 rooms somewhere. So we'd have a single room modular at Cheshire. And it would create an abnormal lunch period for the 5th grade because we're trying to fit 5th, 6th, and 7th, or excuse me, 6th, 7th, and 8th in their schedule of 53-minute periods in the day, and then the elementary program of 30-minute lunch periods into that day in between the middle school lunches. It also would require additional staffing because there are support staff at Cheshire that wouldn't be able to serve the students while they're at Berlin Middle School because our middle schools aren't staffed the same as our elementaries. Whereas if we overflowed to Shale and Cheshire, they still have the middle school support staff that would be utilized. But 2 of the biggest detractors for this option was, one, the Cheshire students who would be attending Berlin Middle School wouldn't have the opportunity to take advantage of the student programming at Cheshire before school because they would have to they would take a bus from their home to Cheshire and then have to immediately get on a shuttle to Berlin Middle School. So for example, Cheshire's, I think it's the Diversity Club, meets in the morning. The students who were overflowed to Berlin Middle wouldn't have the opportunity to participate in the Diversity Club because they would have to be back into transportation. It also would deprive the school of fifth grade student leadership, which we do believe has a value when the oldest students in the school can set the tone. So then the third option we've looked at and what we'll be recommending is to install 6 temporary modular classrooms at Cheshire. I called Mr. Elkins and said, what if
I got a deal for you.
what if we could put 650 or 850 students on site at Cheshire? He did not have a heart attack. He said, let me crunch some numbers and get back to you. He called me back and he said, I can get 892 students in if you can provide the classrooms. I don't know how he came to 892, but I trust him on it. It would help us to bring the class sizes in with district averages. So, you know, the student in the 4th grade classroom would be experiencing a class size of ratio about 24, 25, 26 to 1, which is in par with what you would see at any other school. It would not require additional transportation. We don't believe it would entirely eliminate overflow to Shale Meadows because we can't predict exactly how many students will move in throughout the year next year. But it greatly would reduce the need of overflow to Shale Meadows. It takes away the transportation and lunch concerns. It allows the students to take advantage of all the Cheshire programming and the unified arts teachers that are at Cheshire, with also requiring some traveling teachers to support that work. But we feel like this is the best option for students, for sure, because of the reasons I just outlined. But to do it, we would need to spend a little money on, or a lot of money on modulars. And Mr. Gordon will talk to you about some of the site work that would be needed and the costs associated with that. But, you know, it's a typical Olentangy problem in terms of too many kids, but it's a very unique problem because it's so many in such a short period of time. So we do feel like these 3 options are the best options to consider. And we think that the modular option would be the absolute best based on the reasons I've already outlined. So now I'll turn it over to Mr. Gordon to talk about how it would work, and then we'll take any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Fetty. This site, Cheshire, is a little different than all of our other elementaries. When this building opened to the north, the road, Glen Mead, was not there. So we have an extra connector between the bus lane and the parking lot that, again, none of the other buildings have and is not necessary at this building now that we have the bus access off of Glen Mead Drive. So what we would do is place a 6 classroom modular over that drive that isn't necessary. In fact, Mr. Elkins blocks that off during parent pickup and drop off so the parents and bus traffic do not mix. So that it wouldn't eliminate any of our traffic patterns or hinder our drop off or pickup of students. I met with the fire department on site and talked with them about some of the logistics. They're fine with it. One of the things that we'd have to be concerned with is you have to see the double gate at the bottom. That's for egress. That's not actually for the students in the module. That's actually students. We would fence to the building around the 5th grade wing. There's an entrance there that we'd have a card swipe on for access back and forth, so we'd fence in. But during a fire drill or a fire emergency, students would exit out that door. So once they exit into the fence, they would then have to exit out the double gate with the panic bars inside for egress. So we want to make sure that we were able to capture that safety concern, as well as fence it in so that, again, the students are separate. People can't get to the students from the outside, and students are safe from the traffic flowing back and forth from the building from the 5th grade wing into the modular classroom. Emergency exit on the far left of the screen there, that's where those students would exit an emergency. We would be running fiber and PA system and fire alarm system cables out to the building so that we would tie that building into the modular into Cheshire's PA system for any announcements as well as any lockdown concerns, and then the fire system would be tied in. So if there's a fire alarm going off or a fire emergency, they would be notified as well when that happens. So the building would be fully connected. Wi-Fi, internet, all of that would be the same as well as being in the building. They wouldn't see any difference in the modular from what they're experiencing in the building. Some of the things that we would cover is talk about the fence. We'd have a card swipe for easy access into the building so you wouldn't have to prop a door open. We'd add additional security cameras, again tying in the fire alarm, the PA connection, and the cost with the rental, the setup, and the tear down of the modular unit, along with some of the safety concerns, we've estimated that about $450,000. So, the piers and the building would not be permanent. We wouldn't have to do any cement. It would be on blocks for a 1-year temporary solution. Code allows for that. So it'd be a pretty easy setup from our standpoint. We have a great location for it. If we decide to move forward. Any questions on that part?
So I guess 2 questions. So one is, we can get all those kids through lunch at a reasonable hour. And then 2, the assumption is only 1 year,
Correct.
the modulars?
Correct. The opening of elementary 17. And lunch, we've talked with our food service staff. They feel like they can accommodate that. While there's extra students in the building, they are spread out over all the grades, even though 5th grade would be in the modular, they're spread out. So it is extra students, but it's well within the capacity of what our kitchens are designed to handle. We may have to add extra staffing at the food service department, but as far as how the kitchen's set up and getting the students through, we're not anticipating any concerns there.
And when we've solved this problem in the past by redistricting, so we could have redistricted, and then we did it, in multiple years with areas that were in high growth. And we made the decision a year ago when we were doing Berlin Middle to not redistrict these kids because we knew when we were opening 17, they would have had to move again. And that would have just been, we didn't anticipate it would explode as much as it did, but if you've driven up in those areas, it's, you see 40, 50 houses all in the same stage of construction. So they're coming.
One entrance into the modulars?
One entrance in, students at this point, the plan is for students to come into the building, then exit through the 5th grade wing into the modulars. The majority of those students will be coming in to get breakfast anyhow. So we'll funnel kids off the buses into the building, and students coming off the parent drop-off will go in the building and then exit through the 5th grade wing and through the fence into the modular.
Okay, so are you taking general questions, or is this just for you?
Any
Okay.
questions?
So as we look at these, I hate to say it how I look at this, but 2 types of problems. Problems that parents are going to have and our problems. So is it safe to say that this option you're recommending minimizes parent problems? Because I think the biggest nightmare, and I was talking to Dr. Wallach the other day about it, so if you want to talk about it more.
I have a little note here.
Yeah, it's inconceivable to me to split up families. So that's all I'll say about that. So that would be a huge parent problem. So it seems to me that this option minimizes problems parents would face. Is that pretty fair?
Yeah, I would anticipate that would be the majority opinion. Now, individuals might have different opinions on it, but I know as a parent myself, this would be my preferred option.
Right. So then the biggest thing we're also talking about is we're talking about weather, because they're going to have to come in during, it's going to snow at least once, right? So it'll be curious to see how we work through that. But that's our problem. The scheduling, that's our problem. The staffing, that's all our problem. So I feel comfortable with us solving those.
So if we move forward with this option, Mr. Elkins, who's here, and his assistant, Mrs. Clemens, they're going to work closely with us, with Mrs. Davis in communications to take care of the family communication, the staff communication, to make sure that we have the right staffing available to support the students. And then, as we get closer to summer and know exactly who the students are who are enrolling and which grade level, Mr. Elkins will be able to finalize a master schedule. And I'm sure that will also uncover additional obstacles that I'm confident that we can work through.
Is there possibilities within the intra-district movement where a family could say, we live here, but we're a blended family, or we're a shared parenting? Is there options to, you got 3 kids? Sure, we can do that. I'm just.
To stay at Cheshire?
To go somewhere different if it worked for them.
I'm sure that could be an option, yeah. We just, is the application still open for elementary, or did that close? it's still open for elementary inter-district transfers. Mr. Wright manages that process. So yeah, that could be an option. What we know, though, is that we have a net of, right now, anticipated net of 1 extra classroom across the district at elementary next year. So all of our schools are filling up.
So a couple questions. One, relative to not just teachers and, lunch personnel and things like that, but I'm thinking of counselors and, other support that we may have with that large of a group around elementary schools gives me a little bit of pause. I mean, I agree that this seems to minimize the parent level concerns, but is that going to be part of the calculus as we're thinking
Absolutely.
about?
Mr. Elkins called me, I think it was yesterday, he had just had the thought about the school nurse and clinic aide and just wondering what are their limits, with that many students, can they be effective? Do we need another body there? So I talked to Dr. Behrens about it, and that's something we're working through. And yeah, across the board, our goal, just like in any school, is to do everything we can for students. And just because there's going to be extra students on site at Cheshire, we don't want them to have any less of an experience that they would anywhere else.
Right. I mean, I think that goes to the critical point, which is, the lead into this, these couple of presentations talk about what an amazing experience we're giving for students, right? And it's, that's predicated on our ability to actually do it, right? And it's not just how many people are in the room, how many people we can squeeze into a room. We could probably squeeze more people into a room than we'd be comfortable with. But it's what can we do that we still have that authentic experience for people. What I would say to the community, to the 5 people that are listening beyond what's in this room, is this is going to continue to be an issue, right? I mean, everybody that drives through these areas sees this growth, and it's something that the team is working extraordinarily hard. We very much appreciate the efforts. But this is going to be a continuing problem over the next couple of years as we look at the next levels of elementary schools and middle schools, high schools, and we start to think about this. And I want the community, again, to be thoughtful of that as we start coming forward with what we need to do in response to that. Because the goal absolutely has to be that we continue to give that the right experience for everyone. And that's going to take some community support and buy-in to make sure that we're finding the right ways to do that.
That's well said. I appreciate that.
Good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Finney. All right, we'll now move to the superintendent's report. Mr. Reeve.
All right, I will make this somewhat succinct because Mr. Jenkins got a big presentation.
You got the under.
Yeah, we got an over-under on his time, but thanks to all the people that presented here. Joe and Teresa left, but Monica, thank you so much, and Jack and Jeff. It's amazing when we start talking about all these different options. The first idea that comes up, we think, oh, that makes sense, and then you start talking about all the unintended consequences and all the problems that come about, and I'm always just so thankful and appreciative of how smart and how thorough and how thoughtful all of the people have at all these problem-solving endeavors. And so we land on modulars and then think about food service and security and safety of the kids and how we're going to stage it all, and then the logistics. And Anthony Elkins and Jody Clemens, the 2 administrators at Cheshire, to just say, hey, we're going to send you 850 kids next year. And they basically said to us, okay, we'll figure it out, make it work. And it's just the embodiment of the true Olentangy spirit that, because again, we want to give our kids the best experience possible. So continue to be highly, highly appreciative of that. Jumping right into living the mission, we had 4 bus drivers participate in the regional bus rodeo. And congratulations, Kevin Ball, Michelle Brandt, David Stoltz, and Kim Goebel, and congratulations to Kevin Ball for placing second. I'm going to have to give him a hard time. He's won it before. I don't know what's going on. He's slacking a little bit there.
Slipping.
Yeah, he's slipping, so we'll see. I've noticed in the past when I've had the slide where he's won it, he showed up at those board meetings. He hasn't showed up when he finished. He doesn't show up when he finishes second, so we'll see what he has to say about that.
I get a feeling we're going to get a request for turbocharged buses.
Yeah, there you go. Make that happen. I mentioned our journalism programs before in presentations, but the Ohio Scholastic Media Association had their contests just recently, and all of our publications were awarded. Beacon staff won first place in the news magazine category, and OHS had 14 individual awards. Liberty news magazine placed third. And they had 17 individual awards. Orange's Courier won first place in the state for the 12th year, and their media website was second, and they had 39 individual awards. And then Berlin High School yearbook, The River, placed first overall. So, you know, again, that's just an incredible opportunity experience for our students to participate in the journalism program. We had 22 students across our 4 high schools participate in the World Council on Global Affairs Global Scholars Program, and Dr. Lewis and the Equity Inclusion team lead that project. So we had a number of students. So congratulations to those Global Scholar graduates from all 4 of our high schools. It's really, really a great program, so I'm really proud that our curriculum team has developed and built that program for our students. I always love to highlight the Purple Star program. You know, as a parent of a couple military kids, the Purple Star designations for the Ohio Department of Education. Ohio, 165 schools in Ohio received that designation. We have 20 of our schools. Freedom Trail was just recently earned that honor, and Allen Creek renewed their designation. So, and the Purple Star program shows a significant commitment to serving students and families connected to our nation's armed forces. So, congratulations to those schools, and I, again, greatly appreciate that effort. So, some action items of note: we've got 3 retirements. I always like to highlight our retirements. Judy Carnevale and Jan Muhorter are 2 nurses who have been with our district for a very long time, kind of legendary school nurses. And Lisa Riggle's been at Wallam Creek since it opened. So congratulations to all of them on their retirement. We have some administrative employments on the agenda. We'd like to welcome Mrs. Patricia Nyquist. So congratulations, and her 2 children. To be the new principal, the next principal at Souter Ridge Elementary. Got kids that, you know, I remember when I got my first principal job, and I made my wife and kids come to the school board meeting where I was going to get approved. And my daughter, who was like 6 at the time, and the meeting went forever. It was like midnight, and they didn't even get to the point of the meeting where I got approved. Next morning, they get up to go to school. My daughter says to me, she goes, "Dad, I know why they call it a board meeting now." So we're trying to be quick because, and you know, entertaining because you 2 are here. So. Also like to highlight Christina Sander, Jacob Schaefer, going to be the new assistant principals at Liberty High School. Christina comes to us via Southwestern City Schools and Toll's Career Technical Center, and Jacob Schaefer is a teacher at Delaware City Schools. And Tara Thompson's going to be a new assistant principal at Berlin High School. She's coming to us from the state of Texas. She's originally from Ohio and coming back home. So we're we were really impressed with our assistant, both our elementary pool and the assistant principal pool for high school. Got a couple easements on the agenda for work happening at Elementary 17, and also a right-of-way easement with AEP at Elementary 17, and then an easement with near Hyatt's that we're going to pull out and vote on separately, since Mr. Lester is an employee at Ohio State, isn't going to vote on that agenda item. And then important dates coming up, District Senior Awards, which the communications team's done a great job consolidating that program, and then our special board meeting and our May 9th board meeting. One action item I should have highlighted that I didn't, it just came to my mind, was that you are approving the names of our over 1,750 high school graduates, which was really, and I got to be honest with you, for you, that is the best agenda item you guys get to approve, because it is the culmination of the work that we all do and you approve on our behalf. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Mr. Rave? No?
All right.
All right.
Guys are easy on you tonight.
Yeah, we'll go right to the treasurer's report.
Landing
Mr.
softly.
Jenkins.
I need the clicker.
Oh, sorry, let me get it for you. I'm already up.
You can go up there, you can stay there, one man to choose.
Wherever you want.
Okay.
Starting the stopwatch.
I'll tell you when to begin. Thank you, board members. Just a few action items, and then we'll spend the bulk of the time talking about the 5-year forecast. Minutes from the April 13th board meeting, donations. Certainly, we continue to have a very supportive community. I want to thank Elaine Eddy for all of the work that we did on the MOU with the Teachers Association. We really, I think, had a great partnership. Would have started this conversation, probably back late February? So it worked out really, really well, and so we're very, very pleased to have that on tonight's agenda. It's kind of the culmination of 3 to 4 months of a lot of work. Thanks to the OTA for that as well, and approval of the amended appropriations, and then finally the approval of the financial report. So before I begin the race to the finish, are there any questions about those items? The clock can begin.
Go.
So the 5-year forecast at a glance, I like to try to give everybody the 5-year in 5 seconds. That's really what I want to do. And this particular graph shows that by the time we reach the end of the 5-year cycle, it's hard to believe that we will be a $400 and nearly $6 million district when it comes to our annual expenses. Certainly our revenue at that time, we'll talk a little bit more about the fact that by the end of the 5-year forecast, we know we will have a budget deficit, even though we will end with what would be still a reasonable cash balance. But the trend that you can see is certainly something that will have to be discussed strategically. You couldn't continue to have that sort of revenue deficit and continue to operate like you want to. On a day's cash, I've actually was doing just a little bit of work before I came down to the board meeting. I'm going to modify this slightly for the final submission. We'll probably be up about 6 or 7 days, up to about 63 or 64 days. But you get the gist that we're spending by the end of the 5-year cycle about $1.1 million per day. And again, we're right at that 60-day mark that ironically we just passed for our policy of 6210.01. Our major sources of revenue, we are almost completely funded by local property taxes. And so we have to monitor and watch very, very carefully our property growth. And if you're wondering why there's such a massive jump, if you look at 2022 property values, it's a little under $5.1 billion. That's actual. But we anticipate we're going to jump up to about $5.8 billion next year. I'm going to be honest, it's going to be more than that. That is reflective of about a 15% overall increase in values because 2023 is a complete sexennial reappraisal. I'm thinking it's going to be closer to 20 to 25%. So I fully expect us to blow past $6 billion in value next year. That is critical because we are adding $90 to $100 million worth of property. But outside of that $90 to $100 million worth of new property, remember, we do not get additional funding as property appreciates. In general, if property appreciates 25 to 30%, millage rates are dropped 25 to 30%.
Just for perspective, when 8 years ago.
You have to pause the clock now.
I know, 8 years ago was, our valuation was $4 billion. To go to $6 billion in FS, but a lot of it has been commercial too.
Yes. Yeah, PUP and commercial are both growing as well. So the chart on the right is going to show how we expect the phenomenon we just talked about. You will actually see millage rates drop, and next year, if we're going to go up 15% in value, you're going to see our millage rates drop almost 6 mils, 5.53 mils. So by the time we get to the end of the 5-year forecast cycle, about $232 million a year in real estate collections. The jumps that you see from 20 to 21 are obviously reflective of the 7.4 mil operating levy that we would have most recently passed back in 2020. Public utility personal property, we don't have tangible personal property in the district outside of public utilities, gas lines, electric lines, railroad tracks. That is a very significantly growing source of revenue. As recently as 2018, it was just a shade under 11 million, and by the end of the 5-year forecast, it's going to be just a shade under 25 million. That is growing pretty robustly all over the state. Now, we're not like the eastern part of Ohio, where we would have different types of fracking and other types of minerals in the ground that lead to public utilities and other things to go set up shop there and put in pipelines and whatnot. But we're definitely having growth, as you can see, a steady increase. State formula funding is, unfortunately, fortunately, however you want to word it, the most variability, and it could really play an important part in our 5-year forecast. Right now we have what is going on with House Bill 33. I have not reflected the change, that the amendment that was put in by the House Finance Committee, which would have implemented an amendment that came out of the Primary and Secondary Education Subcommittee to take it to the 2022 cost sets. So right now, we do have the 2018 cost sets. So what that means is we're going to see marked declines in state share. Essentially, the cost set being locked in means that the formula allows for our local capacity to grow. When our capacity grows, that means the state says we're better able to fund ourselves, which means the state share drops of that particular base cost. That's even phasing in at 50% and 2/3 the calculated difference in each year between the base year of 2020. So despite that phase-in, remember the cost inputs are going to drive state aid down. We know that the fair school funding was put into effect by the last biennium budget, but if you're going to keep costs stagnant at FY18 levels through the biennium, that is going to continue to drive more and more cost to the local share. That is the key variable. And so I'm very, very pleased that an amendment was put in late last week to move those cost sets to 2022. I just haven't had a chance to analyze it, and it won't be in this submission. It just came on too late. Plus, all of that still has to go through the Senate. And the Senate, very well may have a say about what they think that looks like. So in summary, we got a long way to go before it becomes law. We are continuing to talk to our legislators. We're continuing to update and put in the best information that we possibly can. But at some point, you have to decide the submission is going to be made. If there are major changes to the budget, we can resubmit in the month of June as a supplemental, and would intend to do just that if the state funding formula turns our way. So this shows that base cost in a couple of different ways by components, as in direct classroom instruction, building leadership, personnel, instructional and student support, district leadership, non-personnel, and then how it's split between people and not people. But again, if you're going to lock in that 2018 cost set, our base cost isn't going to change much. And so out of that 7197, you're going to see that it's going to stay roughly 7197 throughout the forecast. What that leads to, as I mentioned, is not just a stagnation, but a complete retrograde of the state share per pupil. We would drop from about 1,472 per pupil to about 529, and that really tells the story of what we expect to happen with state funding. That leads to that even though that percentage is increasing of the phase-in, it leads to us kind of hitting a high watermark in fiscal year 2025 of the combination between unrestricted and restricted funding, and then we start to come down. And that's a direct effect of those cost sets not changing. With the House Bill 33 factors, and if we just move to the fiscal 20 cost set, and this is not using the 2022, I'm going to go back and forth between these two slides. Look especially at fiscal 26 and 27. Here's with updating the cost sets to 2020. And so I'm going to go you before and after. Before and after. Just moving to the 2020 cost sets will put an additional $15 to $20 million of revenue into our budget over the 5-year cycle, and that's very, very material. Other revenues by sources, one of the key components of that, many of the TIFs that we have in this district, I know there's a lot of questions about TIFs. Most of the TIFs that we have are non-school, and the ones that aren't non-school, a lot of them, there's nothing that really we can do anyway. A municipality has authority up to 75% in 10 years. So I had a request for, and some folks in the community want to see all of our active TIFs. And many of these are, as you can see, 100% schools held harmless, 100% schools held harmless. That means we get what we would get even if the TIF weren't in effect. We're still getting our revenue. Very significant source of revenue, but that being said, there's about $663 million worth of property value in some sort of abatement status. And the base value on that's about $379 million. We still get almost $34.2 million a year in TIF revenues. So our total forecasted revenues go to about $345 million by 2027, and you're normally going to see a moderate growth for revenue. But on the expense side, what you normally see with schools, and especially one growing the way we're growing, on the left is our total forecasted pre-K through 12 enrollment. On the right is our funded enrollment. One of the things that you will quickly see, we do not get a per pupil funding directly in the Fair School funding formula. There is a preschool funding formula. It's flatlined at about $4,000, but on the right you're going to see what the Fair School funding formula variables will be. One of the first things you'll see is we only get half a kindergarten because they currently are half a day. But you will see that we are continuing to increase our enrollment. These two, though, will never be equal because of those, the different way you look at it. Again, this has preschool, this has funded enrollment. What do I mean by funded? A kid who comes in October and attends every day of school, you're still only going to get 0.75 FTE because the kid wasn't here for the first quarter. Kid who's here all year long, you get a full FTE. So these are our staffing increases to keep up with what we have going. You can see they're split out by certified staff. Obviously think teachers and support, direct support of teachers, guidance counselors, social workers, all the things that students need to be successful. Our classified staffing increases and our administrative staffing increases. And then we have a corresponding pupil to teacher ratio, and that is just a straight pupil to teacher ratio, not in any way, shape, or form reflective of a classroom teacher. That if it's a certified staff member, even if they're not directly in the classroom, that's a part of that calculation. And then you can see it broken down year over year across grade levels. So our personnel cost, as you would expect, when we're increasing that kind of enrollment, we will be about a $250 million payroll school district by the time we get to the end of the 5-year cycle. As personnel costs increase, benefits costs increase. And you can see this year we're forecasting just a shade under $69 million, but that will grow to just a shade under $100 million. And what is contained in benefits costs obviously are the board share of healthcare premiums, dental premiums, STRS, all of the benefits that make employment a well-rounded experience for our staff. Purchase service, one of the main things in purchase service is our contract with the ESC. That's obviously where we contract for most of our related staff, related services, OTs, PTs, those sorts of things. Other objects is just kind of everything else. And I beg your pardon, this is where the ESC costs are in our other objects. And that's why you can see big jumps, because as we add more students, especially more special needs students and other students who require additional services, those additional support services must increase as well. So as is normally the case with any school, we are not in any way, shape, or form projecting what we would call wildly accelerated cost increases, but they are faster than revenue, and they're going to be faster in revenue because of the tax reduction factors that we speak of, as our property values go up, we simply do not get dollar-for-dollar increases because tax rates are rolled back so that our voted levies continue to get what they're supposed to get when they were voted in. So while our revenue will grow to about $345 million by 2027, our expenses are going to clip along and be at almost $406 million. So again, one more graphic. The vertical black bars are revenue, and kind of the gray bars are expenses. Obviously, where the black bar is above the gray bar, we have a budget surplus, and you'll see the yellow line, which is the cash. And we're projected to increase through the 23-24 school year, but then we begin for expenses to eclipse revenue in the current cycle to where we end at about $63.3 million. And I may not have been under, but I wasn't over by much.
1426.
Oh! Questions, board members? And that was even with the 30-second interlude by Mr. Ray.
12 seconds.
So I guess it's more of an observation than a question. So I do think, we've got, I appreciate the level of detail in the five-year forecast and in your presentation. I appreciate, and I feel confident in the forecast based upon how you presented it and how you communicated it. It's because it's a tough story. I mean, it's a good story, don't get me wrong, but I appreciate the way you got through it, and I appreciate I'll just say this. It feels like you've been treasurer of Olentangy for a long time, and you haven't.
Appreciate
And I
that.
appreciate
Say
that.
it.
So,
Appreciate that. Got a lot of good people around me who've been very helpful, so it's been easy transition.
questions for Mr. Jenkins? All right, thank you.
I just have one, sorry. I
Go ahead.
thought
No, go ahead.
Brandon's a good poker player, I'm imagining. You just gave like a head nod like you were gonna go. I would have bid on the pass. The rise in expenses is almost exclusively driven by increase in enrollment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, any forecast you're going to build in, as you should, wage inflation based on what you know, based on the increases that are currently negotiated with bargaining units, based on what you know is going to happen, that for each dollar you spend in additional wages, you're going to spend another 14 cents of that dollar for retirement costs, based on reasonable assessments for benefits. But yes, what causes us to need to discuss the fact that I'll just go ahead and lay it out there that at some point in the next couple of years we're going to have to consider how to address the fact that our expenses are outstripping our revenues is 100% our growth. We bring students in, we have to bring in the staff to make sure that, as we talked earlier, they have the best experience possible.
And since most of our money is spent on staff and we have our contracts that are 2-3 years out, we're less vulnerable to inflation, right? Because we know what those costs are going to be as best as we can.
We do. All of our bargaining units, I believe, last through the 24-25 school year. And then we'll be negotiating. And the thing that makes it a little harder on the revenue side is the state budget. I wish somehow we could submit the 5-year forecast in August of the following year. Got to do what you got to do, and we'll know a lot more even by the end of June than we know right now. The good news is, it's good news. Knock on wood, I know we've been here before as a district, thinking that we had some things in a budget bill that kind of took a twist that we weren't expecting. I'm very hopeful that that won't happen this time. If it goes to the 22 cost sets, that will be material, and we'll discuss it at a board meeting in June.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what your experience was in previous districts, but I do think we have a pretty good grasp of staffing, and Mr. Meyer and the team that project that staffing, and especially in special pupil services, and that being accurate, because if it's not, and they come in all of a sudden and say, we need 10 more people, it impacts.
We actually had that conversation We were looking at a model here about 3 weeks ago, Mr. Meyer and I was going by body count, not knowing if they were using FTEs or body counts, but we had it to where we were trying to sort through just a slight difference of 9 FTE on, 2,615. But we reconciled it and we found what they were. And so, yeah, it's a very accurate process that, Mr. Meyer and Dr. Fetty have, and makes it really easy for me.
All right, very good. Anything else? No? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
To whom do I give the power?
I'll go to public participation. Yeah.
I don't have it unless anyone.
So we have no public participation, so we'll move to the discussion items. The first discussion item is the second reading of the board policy updates. Dr. Fetty?
Good evening again. So at the last meeting, we did the first reading of a handful of policies. I'll see if there are any questions on those before you vote on those tonight.
But just one quick comment. I actually had someone ask me about this because they were not showing up online, and someone out there is actually listening and pay attention. So these should all be online now and available to the public so that they can see this.
Yes, and Mr. Jenkins pointed that out to me too, so thank you for bringing that to us. They should all be accessible. And then, oh, those were them.
Couldn't hear her at all.
Amanda made slides for me. And then we'll, oh,
So
sorry.
just to be clear, we have the second reading of a set of policy updates. We now have the first reading
Correct.
of another set of policy updates.
Correct.
Go ahead.
All right, so then the first reading of the policy updates you see here is a larger group. These are from the regular Neola update. Most of the policies have to do with tobacco prevention. The Ohio Department of Health updated some rules that we want to stay in compliance with. The policy committee met about 2 weeks ago, reviewed all of these and prepared the exhibit that you see before you. So if there are any questions now, I'd be happy to entertain those. Otherwise, I'll be back at the next meeting to do a second reading.
And again, just to be abundantly clear, so we will vote on these second readings tonight of that first subset of policies. On this set, you'll come back in May, right, May?
That is correct.
And do the second reading of these policy updates. We'll then vote on these policy updates in May.
And then we'll probably be back in June with another set of policy updates. We'll save that for then.
Okay.
It's going to be a busy summer.
You're
That's
always
okay.
entertaining,
That's
Dr.
okay.
Fetty.
We need that bridges math sooner rather than later.
So the policy committee has been busy.
Yeah, I do just want to highlight the work of
Go
the
ahead.
policy
Yes.
committee, because this, there are a lot of policies here.
Yes.
And when we go through this committee, we sit down and we read them all, word for word, line by line, make sure they make sense, they're workable for the district. We have a lot of great community volunteers on that, so really appreciate the work of that committee.
And it's a good collection of HR, legal,
Yeah.
a very diverse group of folks that provide input into the policy, so very good.
Definitely appreciate all of their efforts.
Yes. Okay. Good. Now, what I have on my agenda is the first reading of the 5-year forecast, which I believe we just did.
Yep. Any questions?
Okay. No? All right. Seeing no questions, we'll move to the board action items. The first board action item is the recommendation of approval of the first set of board policy updates that Mr. Fetty just referred to. So I'll entertain a motion to approve board action item A. I have multiple.
We have A and
A and B. And B is the approval of an MOU with the OTA, which also is reflective of the board policy updates we talked about. Okay, so can I have a motion to approve board action items A and B?
So moved.
Have a second, please.
Second.
Any discussion on board action items A and B? All right, seeing none, Mr. Jenkins, please call the roll.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Dr. Wise?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Jenkins, would you please present the treasurer action items?
Give me just 1 second. Let me mark something unanimous. Okay, so item A is are the minutes from the April 13th meeting. Again, item B, the donations. As you can see, we get some donations from the Liberty Athletic Boosters and Heritage Elementary PTO. Item C would be the amended appropriations. Appropriations is just a fancy term for budget. And then item D would be the financial report from March of 2023. Those items are all being asked to be approved on item E as a consent group of items. If there are any questions, let me know.
All right, so could I have a motion to approve to treasurer action items A through E?
So moved.
Sorry, A through D.
So
Sorry.
moved.
A motion, can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Dr. Wise?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Rafe.
Yes, sir. I'd like to recommend approval of superintendent action items A through G, please.
And does that pull out the OSU
Yes.
items?
Yes.
Well, H next.
Okay, so A through G.
So
Motion,
moved.
please.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
Any discussion on superintendent action items A through G? All right, seeing none, please call the roll.
Dr. Wise?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes. All right, could I now have a motion to approve superintendent action item H, which is the drainage easement, the OSU Wexner Medical Center by Hyatt's?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, please call the roll, Mr. Jenkins.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
Mr. Lester?
Abstain.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Dr. Wise?
Yes.
All right, I will now entertain a motion to move into executive session, and we will enter executive session as permitted by the Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22, to consider the employment of an employee and to consider the purchase of property for public purchase. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
The only discussion is we will reconvene after the executive session only for the purpose of adjournment. We will not take any action at the end of the executive session. So with that, Jenkins, please call the roll.
Mr. Lester?
Yes.
Dr. Dabrico?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Dr. Wise?
Yes.
Dr. Wallach?
Yes.
All right, we will now go to executive session, then come back to adjourn when we are done.
Patrick, are you staying here?
I'll call the meeting back to order at 9:20 PM. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
So we got, not everybody at once, slow down. So I have a motion and a second, a first from Dr. Wise and a second from Dr. Wallach. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Dr. Wallach,
Yes.
Dr. Wise,
Yes.
we'll go all doctors first. Dr. Daverco,
Yes.
Mr. Lester,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien, yes. So 5-0, the motion passes to adjourn. We adjourn the meeting at 9:21 PM.
See you tomorrow.